I'm Ann LeClaire. Welcome to As Fresh as It Gets. This show shows you behind the scenes, talking about the freshest local produce, fish, wine, and even beer. And today we're going to be talking about fishing and farming. It's my pleasure today to be joined by Pietro Parravano, who is a commissioner with the San Mateo County Harbor District, as well as a commercial fisherman. Welcome, Pietro.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Now, we did make a visit to Pillar Point Harbor. I think you were out on your boat that day, and we had a great conversation with Jim Anderson, and I'd just like you to see that before we start talking today.
For sure, we'd love to.
I'm Ann LeClaire. Here we are with another segment of As Fresh as It Gets. I'm here at Pillar Point Harbor with fisherman Jim Anderson, who is on every commission known to man for seafood or fish for the state of California and an expert on local seafood, certainly. Jim, we're going to talk to you in a few minutes on your own boat over there about the crab season and your experience with that. But will you tell us a little bit about salmon season as we head into that, please?
Salmon season opens May 1st and goes till September 30th. We usually get a couple weeks in October. It looks like there's some fish this year, so we're going to get started on time. It seems like we're going to get a fair price, and so hopefully everything will get rolling really well. The sporties are starting to find a few fish in the ocean, and it looks like there's some better conditions further offshore because we've had some real northwest winds, so as soon as that calms down, hopefully we'll get some more closer fish closer to home.
So the supply is looking okay, but you had mentioned something earlier, I believe, about a program the harbor is working on to ensure that there will be more salmon?
Sure, we have a couple programs. Coastside Fishing Club is releasing baby smolt salmon from this harbor. Last year they did 180,000. This year they did 420,000. Wow. And next year they're going to do 480,000, where they release them from this harbor. And hopefully in a couple of 3 years, 2 years, they'll start to come back and we'll be able to catch some of those fish here. We have another local, Mike McHenry from this harbor, that takes his boat as far close to Feather River Hatchery as he can, puts 100,000 baby smolts in that boat and actually barges them down river. Wow. And releases them at the Golden Gate. And so we have a study going on there to see which has a better survival rate and a less stray rate, and how the fish how much of those fish we actually catch in the ocean.
Wow.
So we're doing some experimenting trying to get more fish in the ocean.
So some of our viewers may not know that you actually sell fish off the boats sometimes here, is that right?
We have an off-the-boat sales here, and we have a new app for the off-the-boat sales that you can go to the App Store and find our fish line. You can also call the Harbor Master Office, and they'll give you an idea of how many boats are selling. We sell directly off the boat. Sometimes we have crab and salmon. Sometimes we have some rockfish. We have a couple boats that do rockfish. Later in the summer, we have some albacore tuna. So we have quite a variety of different kinds of fish that are being sold right off the boat direct to the consumer.
Now, is that normally on the weekends, or?
We try to shoot for Saturdays. During the holidays, like Thanksgiving through New Year's, we're every day, because there's a lot of people buying all kinds of crab during that time of the year. And so we try to be here every day. But more this time of the year, we're trying to shoot for Saturdays and Sundays. And if we get enough fish and get blown in or something, then somebody will have something to sell off the boat during the week. So you can either call the harbor or punch up the new app and find out who's selling what.
So should people come prepared with what, ice or a cooler, or is that something
exactly.
provided?
The best thing to do is throw a cooler in the car. That way, if you find something that you like, you can throw it in the cooler. If you want to go do a lunch or spend a few minutes at the beach or something, you can buy a bag of ice and put it in. And when you get home, you still have a real nice product. But by putting it in the cooler, you actually take care of the fish.
So if someone just happens to be over here on the coast side and heading home, is there a way they can see who's selling what off a boat?
Sure, you can go to the Harbor Master Office, and right out in front of the Harbor Master Office is a board, and everybody that sells that day will put their name on the board and what they have to sell. At the top of each finger pier, there's another board, so you can look down each ramp and find out which boats are down the ramp selling what different products there are there.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. Should we take a walk down to your boat and talk about crab season?
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in fishing, how long you've been doing it?
I got involved in fishing as a little boy. My father helped start the charter boat business out of this harbor. They built the Miss Princeton and they launched it here in 1946. And so until I was 5 years old, I was riding every day and going fishing and sleeping in the sink and doing those kind of things. And then when I was 5, 6 years old, I started school, and I'd stand at the front door every morning when Father was leaving and want to go fish, and then Mom would go, no, you're going to school. So she made him sell the boat out, and then later we got back in the business. He ran charters, and I built this boat, and I've been commercial fishing.
Now your boat's called the Elaine.
Elaine. I named it the Elaine after my mother and sisters. Their middle name is Elaine, and you're supposed to name it after your mother, so I named it after both of them. I was lucky enough to get it after both of them. Yes. Yeah.
So talking about crabbing season, Jim, are there restrictions in terms of the size size of the crabs you're allowed to catch, or how does that work?
Sure. We as commercial only catch male crab. We leave the female crab out in the ocean. Females are able to mate and hold sperm for like 2.5 years and continue to fertilize eggs. So we leave them in the ocean and we only bring in the males. We bring in pretty close to a 4-year-old male because they'll actually mate at 3. So we leave a whole year of brood stock and we leave all the females out there so we have a real sustainable resource. So we try to do it that way.
Now, are commercial crabbers allowed to, do they go out before or after the recreational?
Sport usually go out before us, and depending on whether we're holding for a price or something, they'll usually start at least a week or 2 before us, depending on where. In the northern part of the state, they actually start a month before they start, in the northern part of the state. But down here, it could be up to 2 weeks.
So if people are anxious for crab season and want to know the opening date,
November 15th.
Always November 15th.
It's in the record that we start November 15th. We preset the gear on the 14th, and we start pulling gear on the 15th.
Right.
The only thing that would stop us would be bad weather to make it unsafe, or some kind of negotiation on price or something if we have some kind of problems with that.
Well, that's good to know.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Pietro, we heard about Jim's background, his childhood. He even slept in the sink on his dad's boat growing up. You had a different background and made a transition into fishing. Is that right?
I did, and I went through one of those periods in my life where it was pretty early on in the mid-20s when I was teaching school at Woodside Priory, and I was very much enjoying it. And one of the fellow teachers took me out fishing one day. It was pea soup fog. We went out of Pillar Point Harbor and very calm, and we caught the salmon, our limit of salmon, and from then on, it felt like this was an occupation that I wanted to pursue. So after a couple more years of teaching, I started learning a little more about fishing, about what's it like to become a fisherman, and really pursued kind of like a second calling that I had in my career. And now that I've been fishing since 1982, and I've evolved into someone that has advocated for sustainable fisheries and sustainable ocean resources, talking about local sourcing and developing ocean policy with the administration.
Now, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Pillar Point actually has a sustainability policy as well, or follows the Monterey policy. How does that work?
Yes. Well, it starts with I think one of the guidelines that we have implemented, and it's a volunteer program at Pillar Point Harbor, is As Fresh as It Gets program, which sets certain guidelines in terms of if you qualify for selling your fish, you have to follow certain criteria set by the As Fresh as It Gets program. Now, the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a seafood guide watch brochure, and they're probably the best standards, the highest standards for selling and consuming sustainable seafood. And you can get it online. And to give you a little bit of background, when they first came out with this seafood watch program, in the late 80s, early 90s, we had actually worked with them on developing standards and guidelines for king salmon that we were catching in California. So we feel like they've been open to fishermen to a lot of other factors that other seafood watch programs have not. They've kept in-house some of their establishing guidelines, but the Monterey Bay Aquarium is very open and transparent in terms of what they are intending to educate people about their seafood purchases.
You mentioned earlier the salmon this year are large, and it's early in the season. Is that right? I mean, what would a normal catch be like versus this year, or?
And this is, I think, a convergence of factors. We're seeing a whole winter time of a lot of bait in the ocean. We're seeing a continuing population of whales in Monterey Bay, by the Farallon Islands. There's just a lot of marine life activity going on. The ocean temperature has been on the cool side all winter. It's been ranging from the upper 40s to low 50s, which has been cool. And this has developed a lot of upwelling, which brings in a lot of seafood. And this is why the whales have been around, a lot of birds, aviary populations have been around. So it's been it's the connections that we're seeing in the oceans, and as a result of that, the salmon have been having a wonderful time feeding. And we started the season probably averaging in probably about 10 to 12 pound range, and now it's inching up a little bit more. So I would let the consumers know that probably by September, the salmon are going to be a lot larger.
You mentioned, Pietro, you were talking about connections, and before we started taping today, you were talking about the connection between the bay and the ocean and seafood.
That's one of the advantages that we have here in San Mateo County, and we live in between the largest estuary, San Francisco Bay, on the entire West Coast, and between that body of water, which is fresh, the water that comes down from the Sierra foothills and the watersheds, and also the Pacific Ocean. So the connection there is that we need an estuary such as San Francisco Bay to act more like a nursery, protected areas for the young larvae of fish to incubate, to survive their first few months of life, and then move out into the Gulf of the Farallones, out in the ocean. About 75% of all marine life spend a part of their life cycle in an estuary or a wetland.
Now, I remember one of the most fascinating stories that you've ever shared with me over the years was the story of the life of a crab. Will you just tell that to our viewers? I'd love you to share that, please.
Sure. The crab, we're fortunate that the Dungeness crab, in this case, that we're talking about, has really put San Francisco on the map. It's Fisherman's Wharf. It's an icon up in Fisherman's Wharf. And at the harbor, we see a resurgence of requests for Dungeness crabs. The life of the crab starts, as Jim was explaining in his video, that the female crab will carry this egg sac, which they're very vulnerable to predation, to disturbances, and these eggs she will lay these eggs in San Francisco Bay in very low shallow waters, and then they incubate, and then they slowly they're floating on top, and then after about 6 months they create a calcified body, and then that body goes down to the bottom of the ocean, and they start crawling out through under the Golden Gate Bridge out to the Gulf of the Farallones and out in the ocean. So it's if they're not allowed to have these areas in San Francisco Bay where they can lay their eggs and incubate for a while, then their life cycle is threatened and challenged, and consequently we'll see decline in their population.
Now, I want to talk about you personally, and I know you catch all types of fish, right, as well as crabs, but I have to say your halibut is the best that I've ever had in my life, and I believe you don't just sell it off the boats, do you? You sell it elsewhere. Yes,
well, halibut is one of those fisheries that we enjoy doing it. The halibut, being a flatfish, it's when you catch it, it's a little different. The response it's all hook and line caught, and the response that the fish has when it's telling you that it's on the hook is different, because it goes up and down, whereas a finfish, the tail goes this way. So it's more of a resistance type of a reaction that we see when we catch it. And this halibut lay on the bottom of the ocean or in the sand. They bury themselves in the sand. And when you troll for them, you troll and you kind of disturb the sand a little bit, so they kind of come up, and then you put some bait behind that, and then you catch your halibut.
And where do you sell yours?
We've been fortunate that we've been selling at 2 farmers markets, one in Palo Alto on Saturdays and the other in Menlo Park on Sundays. And the Palo Alto, we've been there since 1987, and in Menlo Park since 1991.
Pietro, we have a very short time left. Is there anything that you would want to share with our viewers about the harbor or just fishing in general before we sign off?
Well, we're seeing at the harbor a tremendous increase in visitor frequency and visitor questions regarding sustainability, regarding seafood purchases. And what my hope is that we can develop educational facilities for the visitors to experience what a commercial fisherman go through, what it's like to be able to cook seafood. And we are working with the Gulf of Farallon National Marine Sanctuary and hopefully having a visitor center of theirs. A place at Pillar Point Harbor.
And is that information on your website for Pillar Point Harbor, or is that where people can find more information?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, one of the things that I would like to go back to is a video that we saw with Jim at the harbor. And I think that what really comes out in that video is the benefits that we have as residents of this county. He talks about the culinary aspects of the connection with the seafood, the cultural aspects as challenges of being a commercial fisherman, and also the economic factors that are involved with providing connections and awareness to our food systems here in this county. And we do a lot of work with the farmers and the ranchers in this county, and I think people in this, the residents of this county ought to be really proud of the resources they have.
You're absolutely right. And just as a final note, you actually escort people from culinary institutes a couple of times every year at the harbor, do you not?
We do. The Culinary Institute of America comes out a few times out of the year, and I give them tours of the harbor. And every once in a while, we have a barbecue that they have collected all their produce along the way, and we have fishermen bring their foods in. Last time we had a tour from students from Singapore.
Right. Great. Well, Pietro, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.